Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to TCEQ's UST Compliance Notebook webinar session 2. My name is Christine, and I'll be your moderator today. Attendees will not be able to speak during today's webinar, but you can use the Q&A to ask a question at any time. We will do our best to answer your questions in the Q&A and after each presentation. If we run out of time before we answer your question, or if you have a site-specific question, please email us at psthelp@tceq.texas.gov, and we will communicate with you individually. Our presenters today are Madeline McDonald, Becky Costigan, and Shannon Fraser. The first two presenters are with our Small Business and Local Government Assistance section, and the last presenter is from the PST program. The first two presentations are pre-recorded, but the presenters are available to answer questions. We will take a 10-minute break between presentations, and now for our first presenter, Madeline McDonald.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today to learn about how to prepare for an underground storage tank investigation. As the moderator said, my name is Madeline McDonald and I am a Compliance Assistance Specialist with the Small Business and Local Government Assistance Section, or SBLGA, in our San Antonio Regional Office. My co-presenter is Becky Costigan. She is a Compliance Assistance Specialist in our Houston Regional Office. We will also have a member of the Registration and Reporting section join us today to chat about a few updates. If you have questions during this webinar, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A panel on the right side of the screen. Your questions will be moderated throughout the webinar. For site-specific questions, we encourage you to email us at psthelp@tceq.texas.gov or call our toll-free compliance hotline number at 1-800-447-2827. Here is an overview of what we will discuss today. We will go over some background information and talk about the different checklists used during an investigation. Then we will discuss the investigation process and what happens if you receive violations. We will talk about the assistance we provide at SBLGA and direct you to resources you may find helpful, including information about our online permitting system, STEERS. Our main topic today will be going through the contents of the UST Compliance Notebook, which has instructions and examples of records that are needed to show compliance. We'll have a brief Q&A session about halfway through the webinar before taking a short break and switching presenters. When we get back from the break, Becky will finish going through the UST Compliance Notebook. Then we will have a member of the Registration and Reporting section to join us to chat briefly about the updates to PST Registration Form 0724. Then we will have another Q&A session, so please remember to post your questions in the Q&A panel. Let's start with a little background information. The Energy Policy Act of 2005 requires every state to inspect all underground storage tanks every 3 years. There are over 19,000 underground storage tank facilities in Texas, which means that TCEQ and its contractors are required to do about 6,000 inspections each year. These inspections typically result in a fair number of violations. In fiscal year 2024, we had over 184 administrative orders filed against PST facilities with an average penalty of about $7,699. Our hope is by doing these webinars, we reduce the numbers by giving PST facilities the tools they need to be in compliance before an investigation occurs. Here are the most common violations we saw in fiscal year 2024. Failure to monitor USTs for releases for both tank and piping release detection, failure to assure all record-keeping requirements are met, failure to designate, train, or certify an operator for all UST operator classes, and failure to maintain corrosion protection equipment. There are 3 different compliance checklists that an investigator could use during an inspection. The Energy Act checklist is a focused 10-point checklist based on the Energy Act of 2005. This means it only hits the high points in the rules. However, you must still be compliant with all of the rules that apply to your facility because an investigator could choose to use a different checklist, such as the Modified Compliance Evaluation Investigation, or CMOD, checklist. This checklist covers the same regulations, but is more in-depth and covers about 40 points. There is also a checklist specific to tanks and facilities that are temporarily out of service. You need to be ready for any checklist that applies to you. These checklists are available online, and you can access them on our PST Compliance Resources webpage. We'll talk about how to find those later. Here is a direct link to our checklist page and a screenshot. Investigations can either be announced or unannounced. If they are announced, you'll normally get between 1 to 2 weeks' notice. The investigation will consist of a records review and an on-site inspection. The investigator may request to see your records when they schedule the investigation, or they may ask that you have them available on-site at the time of the investigation. If TCEQ receives a complaint regarding your facility, the investigator must conduct a complaint investigation unannounced within 30 days of receiving the complaint. So the fact that an investigator could show up at your facility unannounced is a good reason why you always want to maintain your records and be in compliance. If violations are noted during the investigation of your facility, the investigator will give you an exit interview form outlining the violations. Violations are classified into categories A, B, and C. Category A violations are the most severe in terms of their threat to human health or the environment. These require automatic initiation of formal enforcement action, and you will receive a notice of enforcement. Our enforcement division will then assess the penalty. Category B violations will be given a notice of violation and establish a compliance deadline. If you do not resolve your Category B violations within that time frame, they will be referred to enforcement. Category C violations are the least stringent and are usually cited for partial non-compliance, but they also receive notices of violation. You could also receive a field citation. These are normally only issued for certain Category A violations. There are a few benefits of field citations over formal enforcement. They are processed more quickly and there is a reduced penalty. If any violations are noted during an investigation of your facility, you are required to get into compliance. You will want to submit compliance documentation as soon as possible because this could reduce the potential penalties. Let's talk about penalties. We are often asked how much a penalty will be, but unfortunately we do not know. Penalties are calculated by the enforcement coordinator that is assigned to your case, and several different factors go into their penalty calculation. They will consider the amount of throughput, or how much product is dispensed on average, and your compliance history. They will also consider any avoided costs or economic benefit, which is money that you saved by not complying with the rules. For example, if you failed to have the cathodic protection system tested, the money that you saved by not paying for the test would be considered an avoided cost and will be included in your penalty calculation. However, there are a couple of ways to reduce your penalty amount. The enforcement coordinator looks at your efforts to get back into compliance, and if those efforts were done quickly and well, this could result in a good faith reduction. There can be a 25% reduction with this route. This is why you want to fix any issues and submit your compliance documentation as soon as possible. The other reduction method is a deferral for agreeing to an order. Agreed orders are when you, as the respondent, agree to the terms and conditions that the enforcement lays out and offers an expedited settlement. There can be a 20% reduction with this route. Now I am going to talk about our section, Small Business and Local Government Assistance, and resources that are available to you. SBLGA offers confidential compliance assistance without the threat of enforcement. We develop guidance documents like the UST Compliance Notebook and PST Super Guide. We have lots of helpful information on our website, www.texasenvirohelp.org. If you have questions, you can call our hotline number, 1-800-447-2827. Compliance assistance specialists across the state monitor this hotline every day that the agency is open. We have compliance assistance specialists in all of our regions that can help you with your questions about environmental rules and regulations. We can talk with you over the phone, but we can also schedule time to meet with you in person, either in our office or at your facility. We also have an Environmentor program. Environmentors are qualified professionals who volunteer their time to help our customers with technical issues such as resolving violations, understanding the rules, and assisting with record keeping. If you are interested in receiving help from an environmentor, contact your local compliance assistance specialist to discuss if you qualify and how to submit a request. We also have The Advocate. This is a free email newsletter that provides information on rule changes and upcoming events or webinars. Many of you probably received an Advocate article that announced this webinar and where to register. If you aren't already subscribed, you can do so on our website or contact us and we can sign you up. Here are some PST-specific resources and guidance that we have created. Our PST Compliance Resources webpage, shown in the screenshot, was recently updated. It is now a central webpage with links to a series of webpages that break down individual PST compliance topics. You can also find links to our guidance documents that are listed on this slide. The first document, the UST Compliance Notebook, or RG 543, is what we will be going through today. It is primarily a record-keeping tool for you as the owner or operator to organize and keep track of your records. However, you will notice that there are also links to information and resources and instructions for the various operating requirements. We also have the PST Super Guide, or RG 475, which is a plain language technical guide to the PST rules. It is broken down by topic into 15 different modules, so you can access a specific module based on what information you need. You can also find a link to it and its web address on the instructions page of your UST Compliance Notebook. We are currently in the process of updating the Super Guide, but it will remain available online while we are revising. Be sure to check those modules regularly to get the most up-to-date version. I highly recommend you read this guidance document because it includes a lot of useful information that may not be covered in this webinar. Last but not least, our PST rule summary goes over the PST rule changes that went into effect in 2018. It is set up as a table so that you can see the different rule citations and the basic descriptions of what changes were made. STEERS stands for the State of Texas Environmental Electronic Reporting System, which is the TCEQ Online Electronic Permitting Program. You can use it to submit initial registrations, annual self-certifications, construction notices, and update owner/operator information and system details. The main benefit of using STEERS is that it will save you time. When you submit something in STEERS, it goes immediately to the PST registration section for review and the processing time is cut down, meaning you will receive your delivery certificates much faster. We have created a guidance document called A Guide to Creating an Account in STEERS ePermitting, RG 531A, that will take you step by step through the process on how to create a STEERS account with screenshots that you can follow. We also have a video tutorial on YouTube called How to Set Up an Account in STEERS that will take you through the process as well. To access the PST forms in STEERS, you must add the Petroleum Storage Tank Registrations Program to your account during your account setup. Or you can add it to your existing account if you've already created one for other TCEQ program applications. If you have trouble creating your account, adding the PST registration program, or filling out the online forms, please call our compliance hotline and a specialist can assist you. Let's get into the notebook. We developed the UST Compliance Notebook as a record-keeping tool to help you maintain compliance and have your records readily available at your site. We updated it in 2022 to reflect the 2018 rule updates, give it a fresher look, and meet accessibility standards. The notebook includes example records to help you know what the investigators are looking for. It also has blank log sheets with instructions that you can use. We recommend that you put this notebook in a 3-ring binder and keep it at your facility so that all your records will be in one place and readily available when your facility is inspected. You'll see that the first couple of pages are instructions on how to use the notebook, request records, where to find forms, where to access online resources, and the rules that apply to PSTs. After those instructions, you will see a list of rule citations. TCEQ rules are found under Title 30 of Texas Administrative Code. Chapter 334 contains most of the PST rules. However, Chapter 37 has the rules on financial assurance, and chapters 115 and 113 have the vapor recovery rules. In general, you need to keep your records for 5 years or as long as the equipment is in use. All installation records need to be kept for the lifetime of the system. The original installation documentation is valuable and can be very difficult to replace if they are lost. If you look at the notebook, you will see that it is broken down into different sections, each with its own instructions and information. The sections of the notebook include registration and self-certification, financial assurance, corrosion protection, release detection, spill and overfill prevention, and more. One of the updates we made to the notebook is that we removed the tabs between sections. However, the notebook pages are numbered, and we added a table of contents for easy navigation. As we go through the sections, we will discuss what the requirements are and what records you need to maintain to stay in compliance with the rules. With all that being said, let's go through the notebook and discuss the records needed for each section. We will start with registration and self-certification. All underground storage tanks that contain or have contained a regulated substance must be registered with the TCEQ. All underground storage tanks that contain motor fuel are required to self-certify every year. Motor fuels include motor gasoline, diesel fuel, or any blend containing one or more of those substances. If there are any changes to the system, including a change of ownership, tank status, or switching release detection methods, you will need to report those changes within 30 days. You can use the registration and self-certification form 00724 or STEERS to update that information. It's also very important to keep your contact information updated because the information on your registration is what the investigators use to notify you of a scheduled investigation. If your contact information isn't up to date, you may not receive that notification. You will need to keep copies of all registration and self-certification forms submitted or copies of STEERS submission confirmations from the past 5 years. You will need to keep a copy of your current registration certificate and a copy of your current delivery certificate as well. The delivery certificate is issued after you submit your annual self-certification form, and it is required to be visibly posted at your facility. As you may know, you are not allowed to get fuel deliveries without a valid delivery certificate. If you are installing new tanks or are bringing tanks that were temporarily out of service back into service, you must submit a construction notification. PST registration will send an acknowledgement letter which can serve as a temporary delivery authorization. A temporary delivery authorization is good for 90 days from the first delivery. Becky will go over construction notifications in her presentation. One important thing to note is that tanks and compartments are required to be physically numbered on site, and that numbering must match up with how you numbered your tanks and compartments on your registration. These labels are required to be legible and permanent, so if you chose to spray paint the numbers on your tanks and compartments, make sure you reapply as necessary so it remains legible. Here's a photo showing a tank numbered as 1 at a facility. For compartmental tanks, label the compartments to match your registration. Here are pictures showing how a facility labeled their compartmental tanks as 2A and 2B. Here is the registration and self-certification form, or Form 00724, which has been recently revised. As I mentioned, you can submit this information through STEERS. However, TCEQ will still accept mailed or faxed forms and documents. So if you would like to use paper forms, you can find them on our website. Remember, this notebook provides information on how to find our forms on our website. We have also provided you with an example delivery certificate in your notebook. Make sure your delivery certificate is up to date and clearly posted at your facility. The next section in the notebook is financial assurance. This is where you can keep all of your financial assurance records. You are required to have enough financial assurance to cover corrective action, which is the cleanup of a release, and to cover third-party liability, which would be bodily injury and property damage caused by a release or an accident. The most common amounts of financial assurance that are required are $1 million per occurrence and $1 million per annual aggregate. Annual aggregate is the total amount required for all leaks that might occur within 1 year. Please note that these coverage amounts are most commonly required, but depending on your facility and throughput, the rules may require different minimum coverage amounts. You can contact us if you need help figuring out how much coverage you need, and we can help you look through the rules to find information. The most common method used for financial assurance is an insurance policy, but other forms of acceptable financial assurance include a letter of credit, a surety bond, self-insurance, or a financial test, and a combination of methods is allowed. You will need to keep current records of your certificate of insurance or your proof of other financial assurance such as a letter of credit. You are required to submit a copy of your current financial assurance along with your annual self-certification form. Otherwise, you will not receive a delivery certificate. As I mentioned before, you can renew your self-certification and upload your financial assurance documentation through STEERS. If you look in the notebook, you will see that we have provided you with an example certificate of insurance. During an investigation, the investigator will want to see the endorsement page for the tanks that are covered by your policy. Let's move on to the next section of the notebook, corrosion protection. Underground storage tank systems are required to be protected from corrosion so they don't end up like the tanks in this photo. The corrosion protection requirements depend on the material of the system components, like the tank, piping, fittings, or valves. You must protect all underground and underwater metal components from corrosion, and again, the material is what determines the requirements. There are different acceptable methods of corrosion protection, such as having tanks and piping made from non-corrodable material, such as fiberglass reinforced plastic or FRP, electronically isolate metal components from contact with water and soil, coating or cladding steel tanks with composite or FRP material. This method does not extend to piping or other system components, and cathodic protection. The picture on the right shows a fiberglass tank installation. There are two types of cathodic protection: galvanic systems or impressed current systems. Galvanic systems use sacrificial anodes connected to metal components so that the anode corrodes instead of the components. Impressed current systems use a rectifier to send an electronic current to the system through attached anodes to prevent corrosion. Cathodic protection systems must be tested at installation, 3 to 6 months after installation, and then every 3 years after that. These tests must be conducted by a qualified corrosion specialist or a corrosion technician. The rectifier for impressed current systems must also be inspected every 60 days to make sure it is working properly, which can be done by the owner or operator. As I mentioned, if you have an impressed current system, the rectifier is required to operate continuously, and you need to inspect it every 60 days. This is a picture of the example log we have provided in the notebook that you can use to maintain those records. When you're taking those readings, you'll want to ensure that the amps and volts are close to what the system was designed for, as shown on your most recent cathodic protection test. If you see any abnormalities in these readings, you will need to contact a corrosion protection specialist to evaluate your system. Let's talk about sumps. As I mentioned, corrosion protection can be achieved by isolating components from soil and water. This example shows two different containment sumps where the pump is protected from the surrounding backfill by a plastic containment structure. Again, the rules say that any metal component that comes into contact with backfill or water needs to be protected from corrosion. In the photo on the left, these metal components are considered to be electrically isolated because they are not in contact with soil or water. You are required to keep these sumps clean and dry to meet the corrosion protection requirements by isolation. As you can see in the photo on the right, those metal components are not isolated because the sump is filled with water. Similarly, the metal components would not be considered to be isolated if the sump had been filled with soil or backfill. If you cannot keep the metal components from coming into contact with soil or water, your system needs to have some other form of corrosion protection, like installing a cathodic protection system to protect those non-isolated metal components. If you have FRP tanks and piping, or composite clad or jacketed steel tanks, then you will need to keep all installation records regarding the corrosion protection, such as an original invoice or delivery manifest. If you don't have installation records, then a written statement from a qualified corrosion protection specialist certifying that the tank and piping meets the corrosion protection requirements may be accepted. For components that require cathodic protection, you must keep all installation records, which could be the cathodic protection system design and information from the manufacturer or corrosion specialist who installed it. You must also keep the results of the initial test, 3 to 6 month test, and 3-year test, and, if applicable, the results of the 60-day rectifier test. Remember that you need to have records to prove the construction material and show that the components meet the corrosion protection requirements. If you don't have installation records, you can have a corrosion technician or corrosion specialist verify the system's construction material and obtain documentation for your records. One way a corrosion specialist can verify is to conduct a visual inspection. Here are photos showing FRP tank ribs. If you look at the picture on the left, you can see the white arrows pointing to the FRP tank ribs through the sump. That is a way to visually verify the construction material. The picture on the right shows you the inside of an FRP tank by a camera survey, which is another way to visually verify the construction material. The white arrows are pointing to the FRP tank ribs in that photo as well. If a visual inspection is not possible, another verification method that corrosion technicians or specialists can use is a structure-to-soil test. Here is an example of these test results that are provided in your notebook. The corrosion technician or corrosion specialist will provide you with documentation verifying the system's construction material. This comprehensive UST system survey is an example of the documentation you could receive for your records. You may not be able to see the example here very well, but it has also been provided to you in your notebook. Let's go to the next section of the notebook, which is tank release detection. All underground storage tanks in Texas are required to be monitored for leaks every 30 days. This means you cannot go more than 30 days between passing test results. There are several different approved methods of release detection, but no matter which method you use, it must be able to detect a release of 0.2 gallons per hour. It must also be conducted in accordance with the third-party certification for that method of release detection. You can look up third-party certifications at the National Work Group on Leak Detection Evaluations website, nwglde.org. All release detection records must be kept for a minimum of 5 years. You must also conduct a 30-day walkthrough inspection of your release detection equipment. This is separate from your release detection monitoring, but they can be done at the same time. This walkthrough inspection includes checking your alarms, looking for any unusual operating conditions, and reviewing your release detection records. Unusual operating conditions could include unexplained water in the tank or erratic behavior of dispensing equipment. We provide an example log in the notebook you may use to record your 30-day walkthrough inspection. You do not have to use the logs we provide, but if you use your own log, you must make sure you are recording all the required information. You must also conduct an annual test of your release detection equipment. This test is to make sure release detection equipment that was installed as part of the UST system is operating properly. It must be conducted in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions or a code of practice set by a nationally recognized association. This includes equipment such as the automatic tank gauge, probes and sensors, automatic line leak detector or ALLD, vacuum pumps and pressure gauges, and electronic equipment used for groundwater or vapor monitoring. You must also conduct an annual walkthrough inspection of your handheld release detection equipment. The annual walkthrough inspection includes checking that your handheld equipment is operational, such as tank gauge sticks or groundwater balers. Here is the log we have created that you can use to record your annual test and walkthrough results. Note that the space for the annual walkthrough inspection of handheld equipment is the last listed row. We have left a couple of rows blank for you to include any additional release detection equipment not already listed. Let's talk about release detection methods. Let's start by talking about the two most common methods of release detection: automatic tank gauging, or ATG, with inventory control, and statistical inventory reconciliation, or SIR, with inventory control. For ATG with inventory control, you need to have a record of at least one passing ATG test every 30 days and your records of your 30-day inventory control with reconciliation. There is an exception in the rules that applies only to emergency generator tanks and used oil tanks. They may use an ATG for release detection without inventory control. For SIR with inventory control, you need passing results from your SIR vendor no more than 30 days apart, and you must receive those results no more than 15 days after the last day of the 30-day monitoring period. You also need to have records of your 30-day inventory control with reconciliation. Keep in mind, even though you are using an ATG or an SIR vendor for release detection, they are not standalone methods. That means each of these methods must be paired with inventory control to be a valid method of release detection. These may be a little hard to read, but here are some example ATG test printouts. When an investigator comes to your facility, they will be looking for a passing test that is no more than 30 days from the previous passing test. So looking at the ATG printouts at the top of the page, they say, leak test results 0.2 gallons per hour, test invalid. And then it says, low level test error, percent volume too low. Those tests would not be sufficient to show compliance. But if you look at the ATG printouts at the bottom of the page, they say, leak test results 0.2 gallons per hour, test pass. Those are acceptable records and would be sufficient to show compliance. The notebook also has an example of SIR results. In this example, the SIR vendor wrote on the side, fail/inconclusive, must fill out suspected release form and research problem. So this test record would not be sufficient to show compliance for the premium tank because it is not a passing test. This would need to be reported to TCEQ as a suspected release, which Becky will be going over in her presentation. Let's talk more about inventory control. In the notebook and on our PST Compliance Resources webpage, we provide inventory control worksheets for blended fuels and non-blended fuels. These worksheets are interactive and were developed from the EPA's guidelines called Doing Inventory Control Right for Underground Storage Tanks, which we have linked in the notebook and on our PST Compliance Resources webpage as well. Previous versions of our compliance notebook include example logs that were pulled directly from this EPA guidance. We have removed those and instead link to the inventory control worksheets we have developed. Here is what the page in the notebook looks like with the links to the worksheets and the EPA guidance. If you need assistance finding them on our webpage, please call us or send us an email. Also note that if you are a retail facility where fuel products are sold to the public, you are required to perform 30-day inventory control with reconciliation regardless of your chosen release detection method. Like I said earlier, inventory control and reconciliation must be done every 30 days. Here's a screenshot of the bottom of our inventory control worksheets. You should see this section called 30-day calculations for the reconciliation portion, also called the leak check. The rule is, if your inventory control fails the leak check 2 months in a row, you must report this as a suspected release to the TCEQ. As I mentioned, Becky will talk more about reporting suspected releases in her presentation. As of February 15, 2024, a new rule update has removed the requirement for retail facilities to perform 30-day inventory control. Despite the rule change, you must retain inventory control records for a minimum of 5 years from the date you stopped conducting inventory control. Therefore, if you stopped inventory control on February 15th, you are still required to keep your inventory control records for at least 5 years. However, it is important to note that inventory control remains mandatory if you are using automatic tank gauging or statistical inventory reconciliation release detection methods. Retail facilities using these methods must continue to do the 30-day inventory control reconciliation. To ensure accuracy and compliance, best practices for maintaining inventory records include regularly calibrating your tank gauging equipment, consistently documenting all fuel transactions, and performing routine reconciliations of inventory records against delivery reports. Implementing these practices will help maintain precise records and facilitate smoother audits. This regulatory update simplifies compliance for facilities using alternative detection methods. The next release detection method is interstitial monitoring. This monitors the interstitial space between the double-walled tanks or piping for releases. If your tanks and piping were installed on or after January 1, 2009, interstitial monitoring must be your primary form of release detection. So, if you use interstitial monitoring or are required to use this method, check your sensors at least once every 30 days and keep records of the results. The notebook has a blank interstitial monitoring log that you can use to keep records of your 30-day monitoring results. The sensor status should be normal at least once every 30 days. If you are using your own log or record-keeping system, just make sure you're documenting the required information. Another method of release detection is monitoring groundwater wells for the presence of floating or dissolved free product, or monitoring vapor wells for regulated substance vapor. Inspect the wells every 30 days and keep records of your results. Also keep a record from the well installer stating that a release from any part of the system will be detected in at least 30 days. Here is the groundwater and vapor monitoring log provided in the notebook that you can use. You will record the depth from the top of the well to the top of the groundwater or vapor reading and note if there was any free product or vapors detected. The notebook includes more detailed instructions. If you use a secondary containment barrier around your UST system as your release detection, you must monitor the excavation zone for any presence of regulated substances, such as liquids or vapors, every 30 days. Keep records of the results. We have provided a blank secondary containment barrier monitoring log where you can document if any free product was detected by sensors or in the observation wells. The last two methods we'll talk about are not allowed for every facility. You can only use manual tank gauging as a release detection method for tanks that are 1,000 gallons or less. If you use manual tank gauging, you must test the tank weekly and get a monthly average. Keep records showing your monitoring results. In the notebook, we provide a table showing the required test durations, weekly standards, and monthly standards for the tests. Here are the example logs we provide for the weekly and monthly tests. For the weekly tests, you will get an average of multiple stick readings and convert that average to gallons. You will subtract the final gallons from the initial gallons to get the test results. For the monthly log sheet, you will use your weekly results to get your monthly average. More detailed instructions are in the notebook. If your weekly or monthly results are greater than the standards provided in the notebook instructions table, you may have a suspected release. Finally, 30-day tank gauging is only allowed as a release detection method for tanks that are associated with emergency generators. So if you have an emergency generator that's using 30-day tank gauging as its release detection method, make sure you keep records showing your 30-day monitoring results. This testing is similar to the manual tank gauging process. However, it is only done every 30 days instead of weekly. We provide a table with the test standards and more detailed instructions in the notebook. It is about time for our first Q&A session and break. By now, you've probably realized that record keeping is extremely important. Now that you have this notebook, you can put it in a 3-ring binder and use it to maintain your records in one place. We are always willing to answer any questions you have about maintaining compliance. Please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A panel, call our hotline number, or email us at psthelp@tceq.texas.gov. Don't forget, we also have regional compliance assistance specialists to help you, and our PST compliance resources webpage that has helpful information, tools, and guidance documents. So with that, I will turn things back over to our moderator and see if we have any questions.
Thank you for that, Madeline. We will now take a few moments to answer some questions. You can post them in the Q&A box or email us at psthelp@tceq.texas.gov. I'll give y'all a few minutes to post any questions y'all might have. Madeline, we do have a question. Would you like to answer it?
Yes, I can answer.
Okay. How do you determine the leak check result, or how is it calculated?
So we will also publish this and provide the answer in the chat just so we can link any resources. But the answer would be 1% of the total gallons dispensed that month plus 130 is the leak check number. And the absolute value of your over or short sum is then compared to that number to see if you pass. We do have Excel sheets that will calculate it for you, and we will provide that in our response to your question.
Thank you. Now for our second presenter, Becky Costigan. Take it away, Becky.
Hello, everyone. My name is Becky Costigan, and I will cover the other topics in the PST Compliance Notebook. This includes piping release detection, spill and overfill prevention, release reporting, construction and maintenance, temporarily out of service facilities, and vapor recovery. Let's jump into these topics together. I'll be starting off with piping release detection requirements. In addition to your tank release detection, the associated piping also requires release detection. The picture on the slide shows a pipe that was degrading from the inside out, and the owners of the facility didn't know it was degrading until it was too late. This type of piping is no longer allowed to be installed, but it is a good reminder to remember that if you do have piping release detection, it allows to detect early damage and releases so it doesn't get this bad. Piping release detection differs depending on the type of piping you have at your facility. There are 2 types of piping, pressurized and suction piping, and each have their own requirements. Pressurized piping requires 2 types of release detection. The first is that it has to be a line leak detector. So all pressurized piping systems must have a line leak detector for each line. For the second form of release detection, you can choose either a 30-day release detection method or conducting an annual tightness test. The measuring leak check rates for each of these methods are shown on the slide. Pressurized piping also needs to have impact valves or shear valves to be installed for each line. The shear valve shuts off the flow of fuel from the underground storage tank system if a line were to have anything impacting the above ground equipment in the dispenser. keeping the underground equipment intact. The second type of piping is suction piping. This type of piping only needs one form of release detection, and you can choose either a 30-day monitoring method or conduct a 3-year tightness test. But whatever method you choose, make sure it's conducted in accordance with third-party certification requirements. For each of these release detection methods, you need to keep records to prove compliance. Pressurized piping systems have 2 forms of release detection, so they need 2 types of records. Since these facilities have line link detectors, that equipment must be tested annually, so the records for that would be the function test results. Then, these facilities must keep records to show compliance with their second piping release detection method. This could be any of the following listed on the slide, but the most common method is the annual piping tightness test. Alternatively, these facilities could choose one of the 30-day release detection methods, such as vapor or groundwater monitoring, interstitial monitoring, SIR with inventory control, or an electronic leak monitor. Facilities that were installed after January 1st, 2009 are required to have interstitial monitoring as their primary release detection method, so that may be their secondary method for pressurized piping systems. For facilities with suction piping systems, they need to keep records to show compliance with the piping release detection method that they choose. This could be any of the following methods listed on the slide. These systems could choose a 3-year tightness test, vapor or groundwater monitoring, interstitial monitoring, or SIR with inventory control. Now, there is a certain type of suction piping that is a high-mounted check valve located on the suction line at the dispenser. This type of piping does not require piping release detection because the product does not stay in the line. If you have this type of suction piping, you must provide documentation to prove that you have this type of piping. An example of documentation could be as-built drawings from a registered UST contractor. This is a table that can be found in the Piping Release Detection section of the Underground Storage Tank Compliance Notebook, and it gives a good summary of what the piping release detection requirements are. The piping release detection methods are all listed on the left-hand side. The records that are required to show compliance are listed in the middle, and the monitoring frequency is listed on the right. The next 2 slides are examples of line link detector annual function tests. Remember, the line link detector is a requirement for all pressurized piping systems. This slide shows a mechanical, non-electronic line link detector function test, which checks the 3 piping lines and the 3 separate line link detectors, which all say pass. And this picture is an example of an electronic line link detector, where you can more clearly see that the leak check rate is 3 gallons per hour. And here's an example of a passing piping tightness test. These are done annually for pressurized piping systems and every 3 years for suction piping systems. Other 30-day release detection examples are listed in the Compliance Notebook under the Tank Release Detection section, so you can use the same records that are listed in that section for piping release detection. Here we see 2 photos that show shear valves anchored properly. You can see each line has its own shear valve, which is anchored with a metal crossbar. Remember that shear valves or impact valves are required for all pressurized piping systems. Moving on to the next section in the Compliance Notebook, we're going to discuss the different requirements for spill prevention equipment and overfill devices. The photos on this slide show the tight fill fitting on the left, the spill bucket in the middle, which clearly shows the fill port, and the fill port cap on the right that goes directly over the fill tube. This equipment ensures that your system is liquid tight during product transfers and minimizes any chances of water and debris going into your tanks. Here is a summary of all the spill and overfill equipment requirements. You can find this table in the spill and overfill section of the Compliance Notebook. And looking at the table, the left column is the equipment, the type of equipment that's required. The middle column are the required records for that type of equipment. And on the right is the monitoring frequency for either inspections or testing. Let's start with the requirements for your spill prevention equipment. Facilities are required to have tight fill fitting, making it liquid tight between fueling transfers. Facilities must also have a liquid tight spill bucket to catch spills and prevent debris and liquid, such as rainwater, from going into the tank. Starting in 2021, all facilities had to meet new rules which increased the frequency of spill prevention equipment inspections. Now, spill buckets must be inspected for integrity every 30 days, and debris and liquid found in the spill bucket must be removed within 96 hours. And these rules added a 3-year tightness test to spill prevention equipment that are single-walled. However, if the spill prevention equipment is double-walled, then these facilities can inspect the integrity of the equipment during the 30-day walkthrough inspection instead of doing a 3-year tightness test. All containment sumps, submersible turbine pump sumps, and under dispenser containment areas must be monitored annually. So that means every year you need to be checking these sumps. Keep in mind that if you do any repairs, the spill prevention equipment, sumps, spill buckets, must be tested within 30 days to show that they are working properly. In addition to these annual inspections, any containment sumps used for interstitial monitoring, where interstitial monitoring is the primary release detection method, must also be tightness tested every 3 years. However, if the containment sumps used for interstitial monitoring are double-walled, then, just like spill buckets, the facility can choose to monitor these during the 30-day walkthrough inspection without having to conduct a 3-year tightness test. This slide gives an overview of the spill prevention equipment records that are required to show compliance. Make sure to keep records of the spill prevention equipment inspection that is supposed to be completed within the 30-day time frame. If you find liquid or debris during the inspection, make sure to remove it within 96 hours and keep a note on the form to show proper disposal. If your facility has single-walled spill prevention equipment, single-walled spill buckets, remember to keep records of the results of the 3-year tightness test. If your facility has double-walled spill buckets, you are not conducting the 3-year tightness test, make sure that the spill buckets are inspected during the 30-day walkthrough, and you have documentation to show that your equipment is double-walled. As for sumps, remember all sumps must be inspected on an annual basis, so be sure to keep documentation to prove compliance with this annual inspection. And sumps used for interstitial monitoring, where interstitial monitoring is the primary release detection method, these sumps need to be tested every 3 years for tightness, or they can be double-walled and included on the 30-day walkthrough inspection. All of these records must be kept for at least 5 years to prove compliance. This slide lists the disposal options from the wastewater that's generated from a liquid tightness test, and the resulting liquids must be managed appropriately. While the liquids can be reused for further liquid testing in other sumps at the same or a different facility, you will eventually have to dispose of the test liquid. This includes disposal at either a wastewater treatment facility or getting an authorization to discharge the wastewater under a general permit, such as the hydrostatic water general permit or the petroleum fuel or petroleum substances general permit. More information is available on the web page linked on this slide. Here is an example of a spill bucket inspection document on the right-hand side of this slide. Remember to inspect the condition of the spill bucket, look for cracks, liquid, and debris. This inspection should be conducted every 30 days. I also included a picture of a damaged spill bucket. You can see in the picture that the bottom has busted out, which won't keep debris and rainwater out of the tank and could compromise the integrity of the facility's fuel and gives more potential for fuel to be released to the environment since it's not liquid tight. These are examples of spill buckets. On the left, you see one that's in fairly good condition, and on the right, there are some leaves in the spill bucket that the facility will need to clean out. During these 30-day inspections, we want to make sure that the spill buckets are clean and dry, there's no obstruction to the fill pipe, and if it's double-walled, check the interstitial monitoring area, make sure it's free of leaks, and that the sensor is still positioned correctly. Here we see an example of what you could use for your annual sump inspection. These inspections are to check the integrity of the sumps, and just like spill bucket inspections, you need to remove any liquid or debris that's found within 96 hours. And this is an example of good documentation that shows proper disposal of spill bucket waste. For overfill devices, facilities have two options for compliance. The first option is the automatic shutoff device, also known as the flapper valve, which should be set to activate at 95% capacity. The second choice is a flow restrictor, which is also known as a ball float. This should be set to activate at 90% capacity. Keep in mind that the activation level varies depending on the type of overfill device you have and if the overfill device is equipped with an audible and visible alarm. There are also a couple relatively new requirements for overfill devices. Facilities are no longer able to repair or replace flow restrictors after September 1st, 2018. If you currently have these, you can continue to use them until they are required to be repaired or replaced, and at that point, you will be required to install an automatic shutoff device instead. Another relatively new requirement is that as of January 1st, 2021, overfill devices must be tested every 3 years to ensure activation at the correct level. Since record keeping is the name of the game for underground storage tank equipment, let's discuss what records you need to document compliance with overfill prevention. If you have an automatic shutoff device, which is pictured on the left, then this device, which is located in the fill port or fill tube, can be visually verified by an investigator. You should still keep documentation of installation, repairs, or any test records. The flow restrictor, pictured on the right, is in the vent line and much harder to see. That means installation records should be kept as proof that your facility meets the overfill prevention requirements. Also, have any 3-year testing results to show compliance with the 3-year testing requirement. And keep in mind that ball floats cannot be repaired or replaced after September 1st, 2018. All right, let's talk about suspected releases. A suspected release occurs when a facility receives a failed or inconclusive test result from a release detection method, or if inventory control fails for 2 consecutive 30-day periods. If your facility experiences a suspected release, you need to report this information to the TCEQ Remediation Division within 24 hours. You must mention the date of the suspected release, the date the owner and operator became aware of the release, the date reported to TCEQ, and any results of the follow-up investigation. After your initial report, you investigate why you had a suspected release by doing a system tightness test within 30 days to determine if the leak exists. The owner-operator must file a second report which contains more details of the investigation procedures. It must include the results of all tests or monitoring performed and be filed with the agency no later than 45 days after learning of the suspected release. TCEQ's Release Determination Report form can be used for the secondary report. If there is a confirmed release, additional requirements and corrective action will be required by the TCEQ Remediation Division. If you have a suspected release, keep all of your release detection records and any reports you have submitted to TCEQ. Any tightness testing documentation should also be kept to prove that you're no longer experiencing a suspected release and the problem has been resolved. In the event of a confirmed release, the Remediation Division may require more information and request a corrective action plan to be submitted. This slide shows the TCEQ Incident Report Form 20097. The top of the page has the email, phone number, and fax number, so you can relay this information to the TCEQ Remediation Division. They also have a separate phone number to call in case of emergencies. And this slide shows the first page of the Release Determination Report Form 0621. This is the report that should be submitted to the TCEQ within 45 days of learning about the suspected release. Facilities should submit this form with their tightness test results. Okay, now we're moving into the construction and maintenance section. I will discuss the construction notification form and supporting records that could be kept in this part of the notebook. If you are going to conduct any work on your facility, such as tank installations, removals, or repairs to an underground storage tank, you may need to submit the construction notification form. This slide lists activities that would be required to submit this form. It should be submitted at least 30 days prior to any work being done on your system. And remember to call the TCEQ regional office 1 to 3 days before work is scheduled, because an investigator may come out to ensure that it's being done correctly. As far as records, keep copies of any construction notification forms to show that the correct documentation has been submitted before this work was initiated. And if your facility repairs or replaces any equipment, you can keep the receipts or invoices to document the new equipment was installed. You're required to keep these records for 5 years. This is a construction notification acknowledgement letter, notifying the facility that the TCEQ received the construction notification form. This letter was for a tank installation and served as a temporary delivery authorization for 90 days. The construction notification form is shown on the left side of the slide. It should be submitted 30 days prior to work being done on the system, along with a notification to the facility's regional office 1 to 3 days before work starts. This form can be submitted by mail or electronically in steers. Now let's talk about the operator training requirements for underground storage tank facilities. This slide has a screenshot from the compliance notebook that shows a nice summary of what these requirements are for operator training. Expanding on those requirements shown on the previous slide, each facility needs to have an A, B, and C operator designated for each facility. A/B operators must receive training from an approved training provider on the TCEQ's website, which is linked on this slide. After the course, they will receive a training certificate, but they must be retrained every 3 years. All operators must know what to do in case of a spill, where the emergency shutoff is located, the contact information for the A/B operator, and when to call 911. For operator training records, make sure you have an up-to-date A/B operator certification, documentation which proves C operator training, and ensure one operator is on site during the hours the facility is dispensing fuel. If you are considered an unmanned facility, you must have a sign that includes the following information on this slide: procedures of what to do in case of a spill, the location of the emergency shutoff button, when to call 911, and the contact information for the A/B operator. This is an example of an A/B operator certificate. And here's an example of a C operator log sheet that could be used to record training of C operators. C operators can be trained by an A/B operator for a facility regarding what to do in case of a spill, when to call 911, the location of the emergency shutoff, and the contact information for the A/B operator. Remember, all operators need to be retrained every 3 years. Now we'll transition to different requirements for facilities that are classified as temporarily out of service. As you can see on this slide, these facilities will probably be out of service for a while until they complete some necessary repairs. Another common scenario for out of service facilities is if someone bought a convenience store that happened to have underground storage tanks, but they don't plan to sell gas or use the tanks at all. The TCEQ allows you to put your tanks temporarily out of service, but there are still requirements for these facilities. This includes updating the registration within 30 days of the change of status from active to out of service, making sure that the tank system is secured, but keeping the vent lines open, maintaining corrosion protection since there's still piping and tank components in the ground. And even though these tanks are temporarily out of service, you must still have operator training, so A, B, and C operators. Financial assurance is also required in case there's a release to the environment. So these facilities must have financial assurance unless they prove 2 things. First, that the system is empty, and there's a very specific definition of empty in Chapter 334, which states that all liquid has been removed from the system and does not exceed 2.5 centimeters at the deepest point. The second part is that the facility has conducted a site check in accordance with Chapter 334, and this shows that there's no contamination at the site. Only when the facility meets these 2 requirements can financial assurance be removed. What if your temporarily out of service facility is not empty? Then, in addition to the requirements on the previous slide, you will have more requirements because you still have regulated substances in the system. These facilities must maintain their annual self-certification and registration using the TCEQ registration form, which can be submitted by mail or electronically in STEERS. And they also must maintain 30-day release detection records and annual release detection equipment testing. And since there's potential for a release to the environment, any suspected releases should be reported to the TCEQ Remediation Division. This slide is a breakdown of the requirements for empty and non-empty out-of-service tanks. To verify your facility is compliant, ensure you have the records applicable to you. Requirements for empty tanks are listed on the left. They need records for tank and piping, corrosion protection, operator training, documentation that shows the system is empty, and financial assurance. Remember, if the facility has an empty tank and proof of conducting a site check, then they could remove financial assurance. Non-empty tank requirements are on the right. You will need records to show your corrosion protection, operator training, financial assurance, annual self-certification, 30-day release detection records, annual release detection testing results, and documentation of any suspected releases. The last section of the Compliance Notebook addresses the requirements for gasoline vapor recovery throughout Texas. Since Stage 2 should be successfully decommissioned as of August 2018, we are only focusing on the Stage 1 requirements. When you look at the diagram on this slide, the left side shows Stage 1. Stage 1 vapor recovery is a control strategy to capture gasoline vapors that are released when gasoline is delivered to a storage tank. The vapors are returned to the tank truck as the storage tank is being filled with fuel, rather than being released to the air. Stage 1 requirements are based on the facility's location and the facility's monthly throughput of gasoline each month. There are certain counties that are listed as non-attainment based off their air quality, and they have more strict requirements with this rule compared to the other counties in attainment areas. These requirements are including inspecting for liquid leaks, visible vapors, or significant odors during gasoline fuel deliveries, having submerged fill tubes, vapor control systems, vapor balance systems, conducting annual Stage 1 testing, and submitting a 6C certification for compliance. For more information on Stage 1 requirements, you can visit the Vapor Recovery webpage to determine your facility's requirements with this rule. There is also a map on the Stage 1 Vapor Recovery webpage that shows each county and their Stage 1 requirements depending on their gasoline throughput each month. For Stage 1 documentation, keep records of the gasoline throughput each month, such as the 30-day inventory records. And depending on your location and throughput, you may need to keep additional documentation to show compliance. Here's an example of the Stage 1 vapor recovery test for the pressure vacuum vent cap. This is an example of a Stage 1 pressure decay test, 102-1. And here's an example of the Stage 1 vapor recovery test that shows two tests and they both pass. That's all the information that's included in the Underground Storage Tank Compliance Notebook. What if you are missing information? We have some resources available to you if you're looking for information about your facility. You can search the TCEQ Central Registry using your regulated entity number or RN number, customer number or CN number, or your PST ID. The Central Registry web address is on this slide. And alternatively, you can contact your TCEQ regional office to look at your actual files, or the third option is contacting the TCEQ Central File Room in Austin. But keep in mind that you may have to pay for copies. If you are looking for blank PST forms, you can go to our Forms webpage and search in the form number or keyword. This can be found on the TCEQ Home webpage, and click search forms in the search box, and you can also use the link on this slide. That sums up the contents of the Underground Storage Tank Compliance Notebook, but you can always contact us if you have questions, either using our hotline number 1-800-447-2827 or by emailing us at psthelp@tceq.texas.gov. Now we're going to have a short Q&A before hearing from our third and final presenter from PST registration. So if you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A box on the right side of the screen, and the moderator will read them to us.
Thank you for that, Becky. We do have a couple questions coming in last minute, and as we look over that, we will move on to our final presenter. Shannon, please take it away.
Hello, my name is Shannon Frazier. I am the section manager for the registration and reporting section in the Office of Waste here at TCEQ. A big thank you to SBLGA for hosting these webinars and inviting me to speak to you folks today about our PST registration program. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're on a tight schedule. So here are the items that I'm going to be going to discuss. Then we'll open the floor for some questions if you have any, and hopefully some of those questions will be answered during the slides. Primarily, I'm going to talk about the benefit of going electronic and creating a STEERS account for all of your PST registration needs. Then I'm going to spend some time talking about our new UST 00724 form and the importance of ensuring the accuracy of the information and if it's completed before submitting your information to the TCEQ. I cannot emphasize how important that is to us. Finally, I'm going to go through some of our key resources we have available to assist our PST customers. So let's go ahead and jump on in. So what benefit isn't there to using STEERS? Of these 5 bullets, it's really hard to say which one has the most beneficial impact for our customers. I guess that would depend on your role. And setting up your setting up your STEERS account can take some time. However, if you dedicate that time on the front end to set up a STEERS account, it will save you hours of time in the long run. And I'll probably be very repetitive in saying that because it's true. STEERS is hands down the most efficient method that we have for processing registrations and getting your NOCs, your notices of construction, your notices of registration, and your delivery certificates to you. So you can see here that we have, there are faster turnarounds for approvals. The renewal delivery certificates for multiple facilities can be processed basically at one time. You can access and update billing and owner-operator information. Contractors who submit notices of construction electronically can access and print the acknowledgement letters immediately. And there is data validation in place to reduce submittal errors and delays with registrations. And I think that is one of the most important things right there. We have the data validation in place to assist the customers to ensure the information that they are submitting to us is actual and factual and accurate. We do, and I'll talk about this when we get to our forms too, we have a very, very high incomplete submittal rate and inaccurate and incomplete submittals that are submitted to us on a monthly basis, but I'll get to that shortly. So essentially, every type of UST registration can be completed through STEERS. So for renewing facilities, whether you have one or numerous stores, you would choose self-certification for multiple facilities, which would be this little first button right here. And that will allow you to update and renew basically all your information for a single or multiple facilities. There are some, and here are all of our other different types of, we call them applications that you can do in the STEERS, which is basically everything. All right, everything having to do with the PST registration, other than a few specific tasks that cannot be done through STEERS. For instance, and these are mostly technical and things like that. For instance, you cannot update tank capacities. You cannot change the ownership of an inactive tank. You can't change facility addresses for initial registrations for facilities that don't have an available address in USPS. Those are things that you cannot do in STEERS. You have to submit the 00724 form. Okay, next. Okay, so that's basically kind of the STEERS overview. I know that we're on a short time frame, so I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time about it, but I do want to go back and just talk about STEERS for a moment. This is the way that we really think we will be able to, and going forward, this is the way that we know that the PST registration group will be best able to serve our public. Electronically, there are always records, there's data standards. We're not necessarily, and I'm using air quotes that you can't see, chase 1,500 to 2,000 paper submittals a month. We heavily emphasize the use of STEERS going forward. And I'm going to talk about a couple resources here in just a moment. So let's talk about the new UST 00724 form. We're rolling out the new UST form for the October 2025 renewal period. It is now available online, and we will be sent. We did send out an e-blast with a link to the new form, and a copy of the new form will be included in the renewal letter mail out that we send out a couple months before those renewal. After November 1st, I want to be very clear on this. We're given 60, 75 days heads up. But after November 1st, 2025, old versions of the form will not be accepted. So we do know, just based on the consistent errors that we get from a lot of our regulated community, that folks are keeping old copies of the form probably filled out, and then they just kind of update them with a signature and a date annually. So those old forms, if you submit those after October, they will not be, after November 1st, they will not be accepted. You will have to download and fill out a new copy of the form, or go to STEERS. The new form, I'm about to show you all some pictures of it, and you'll see that it looks completely different than the old form. It's much more linear flow, and we think that's going to be the best thing for the regulated community and our internal staff members here. So for your financial assurance, the facility name, which is extraordinarily important as well, the facility name, ID, address, and number of tanks must match the information in your registration verbatim. There can be no deviation from the information provided in your financial assurance policy to what the registration information says. This is something that we've been putting under the microscope for the past fiscal year, and we are sending those errors directly back to the customers to work with their insurance companies and address. So it's imperative that y'all check those line by line. Okay, and that actually leads into my very next item here. It is critical that owners and operators carefully review all of the information line by line to ensure the accuracy and completeness before signing and submitting finalized forms to the TCEQ. We have an incredibly high volume of incomplete and inaccurate submittals, primarily with annual renewals, which has a direct impact on how efficiently we can process and assist the regulated community. My staff spends an extraordinarily a lot of time working we'll call it hand-holding, a lot of our regulated community, fixing the same errors year after year after year. And we have this all on record because we keep notes of the annual renewals. So we know that the consistent errors are consistently happening. So it's very important for the regulated community to help us help you by meticulously checking all of your information to ensure the accuracy with your registration and your financial assurance, Secretary of State, etc., before you submit that information. Okay, I cannot emphasize that enough. All incomplete and incorrect submittals will be returned to the regulated entity to be corrected before we process them. So we will do a cursory review to ensure that the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, it's signed, it's dated, all of the information in a quick review is there. If it's not, we will send it directly back to the customer to fix all of their errors. Okay. So here is a view of the new slide. You can see that it is boldly different than the old slide. The new form, we have it as a PDF, as are all of them, but that can be downloaded. You can see these red boxes here and bolded information. Those can be filled out by typing them in. So you can download this form online. It can be filled out, then it can be printed, and then it can be signed and submitted. But essentially with the new form, as opposed to having the 2-column system, this one is very linear. It goes top to bottom, left to right. Anything that has, if you're filling it out online, anything that has this red box or a bold, it's bolded, it's a required field. So even these bold boxes, obviously you need to choose one and go through section by section and ensure that every box is checked that needs to be checked. But this is the new form, so feel free. It's available on our website now. If you want to start using it now, we highly recommend that you do so. It is easier to process for the TCEQ staff when the forms are filled out electronically, printed and signed and submitted, rather than filling them out by hand, because it takes the guesswork out of the staff to try to figure out some folks' handwriting. It runs the spectrum. But if they are filled out on a computer, or downloaded, filled out, printed, signed, and submitted, obviously it is easier for us to process those. But clearly you can see here, this link right here will take you directly to Steers, because we do want folks to go to Steers. I can't emphasize enough as well to do not forget to sign and date the document. I can't emphasize that enough, how many of these registration forms we receive that are not signed and dated, which to me is like the absolute most important thing you should do. So again, all the sections are the same, but again, please take your time and read the form very carefully so we can get it submitted correctly the first time. We also have an email field in the form, because we recognize that the fax machines, when we receive a fax, I know a lot of the regulated community still loves using those fax machines. But let's be honest, fax machine is an old, antiquated type of technology, and the faxes that we receive, they run the gambit of easy to read to absolutely ineligible. You can't, it's unreadable. So we really want folks to get away from using fax, get into Steers, and we are offering now an email option for those folks that want to fill out the form, sign and date the form, scan it, and scan it and email it to us rather than faxing. We really want to get away from fax. It's just, again, an antiquated technology that's still allowed to be used, but we do recognize that it causes us lots of errors, and it causes the regulated community lots of issues too. I'm going to reemphasize this. Please do not forget to sign and date before you submit the form. We did not add a red box to this field like the others that you can see here. That are all these red boxes and bolded fields are required, but the signature box does not have a red box around it, because we cannot accept type and fill signatures. So if you have a DocuSign, you can drop your actual DocuSign signature into there. Otherwise, you need to print and sign it. So if you have that fill and sign kind of thing and it puts it in a fancy little font, looks cursive, that's still not considered a signature. So we will not accept those. We'll send those directly back to you, okay? All right, so let's see. We also have we added an email field in here. Emails have historically not been a required field, and they're still not required, but we want to really start using our technology, and we're going to start doing a lot more e-blasts and emails and those type of things to notify the regulated community of anything that's happening, any training that we're going to be having, any changes that are coming up, all of those things. So we're really emphasizing to the regulated community, please provide, and the operators and owners, please provide an email address for those folks that would like to receive those updates. Okay, moving on. All right, so let's get into some of our resources here. And I'm going to go through, I have a slide for each of these resources. And SBLGA provided a copy of my presentation. So you should also have a copy of these, a copy of the presentation as well as all the links. And I recommend if you open these links, bookmark these links in your browser for later use. Okay, so the first one is the PST Am I Regulated page. Then we have a tool that we built about 1.5 years ago. It's called the Incoming Document Search Portal, which is a huge benefit to the regulated community. It allows you to, instead of calling to calling and speaking to a rep or potentially getting a voicemail, you can follow this link to a website and see if we received your information. And it also has the approximate processing time for all of our different assignments. So instead of having to call and saying, did you get my stuff? When will it be finished? You can look on the website and say, okay, my stuff's been received. They'll have it done within X amount of business days. So we think that's a huge plus for the regulated community. We also have financial assurance requirements for UST, for the underground petroleum storage tanks. This is something that we created last year after we recognized the issues we were having with the financial assurance accuracy from the policy to the registration. And the financial assurance folks over the financial assurance folks here at the TCEQ wanted us to put this under a microscope. So we did. And we created a website to help the regulated community when they're filling out their information to see what is accurate and what is not, what will be accepted and what won't. And finally, we talked about the steers accounts. We do have a video available out there on the TCEQ website. It is to set up a tier 2 account if you're familiar with tier 2. However, setting up a steers account is setting up a steers account, but it's just when you go in to do your registration, you would have to make sure that you choose the appropriate PST application. But this will, following this video, will help you just set up an account in general. So let's talk about these pages real quick. This is the primary PST Am I Regulated web page. Here at the very top, you can click this link and it'll take you to that incoming document search portal. And you can very easily look up your information and find out what we got. This video here is a little dated, so this will probably be coming down, and we're going to be updating our video since we've updated the form. But this web page right here, and I didn't put the whole thing on here because it's pretty long, has all the pertinent information and links to the pertinent information you will need. If you have technical questions or registration questions, you can email them to here, and my staff will follow up with you. Okay. So this is the incoming document search portal. It's through the Texas Open Data portal, but as you can see on the previous slide, you can click right here and it'll take you to right here. And this has been a game changer for us. We get thousands and thousands of phone calls, but this has helped us reduce those by 50%. And a lot of those phone calls were because people still use fax machines, and they are so, not trustworthy. Folks would constantly call us right after they fax something to say, "Did you get my fax?" Well, those interruptions, when you think about, a couple hundred a day, takes up hours a month. So we created this tool where you can come in here, enter your registration number. You don't even have to select the program, but you can. And it's PST, petroleum storage tank, industrial hazardous waste, amongst others. Enter that number, hit enter, and it will generate and tell you that we've received your information. All right. And then right here, we have all of the processing times for each of our different assignments. So right here, you can see that a PST with an expired renewal will be processed within 3 business days. PST renewals expiring within a month will be done within 7 business days. And those folks who submit to us very early, y'all will be done in 20 business days. However, when you submit early, your chances, there are no chance that you will potentially expire your delivery certificate because you're ahead of the game. But it is a great tool. It's very easy to use for our customers who submit paper forms or fax to find out if their information was received. Again, we have the approximate processing times, and we rarely do not meet those times. You can pretty much guarantee if you see it on here, it's going to be meeting this time. These tools are developed to save you and the TCEQ staff time on the phone and further delay of the processing of our registration. Again, just to have an idea, we get around 1,200 calls a month. This was able to, just to see if folks' mail and fax has been received. This has reduced those in half. So again, if you can think about a 5 or 10 minute call, 1,200 of those, that's about 15,000 minutes a month that we've been able to cut in half, and it helps us continue to process those registrations to ensure that there's no disruption in your business. Again, if you have a call, please call. If you have questions, we want you to call and get those. And we have, we receive hundreds of those assistance calls a month, and we have fantastic staff that is always ready to assist. Moving on. Okay, so here's the financial assurance requirements for USTs. You have a link to that as well. And as I mentioned earlier, it's very important that your financial assurance policy information matches exactly what is in your registration information. If there are any discrepancies, the registration will be sent back as administratively incomplete, and the customer will need to follow up with your insurance company to correct any errors, then resubmit your documentation before we will approve your renewal and release your delivery certificate. Okay, so looking at the web page, you can see that there's a table of frequently asked questions, and this table is pretty long. That's why I only kind of included the top end of the web page. But every kind of question that we've received from regarding a financial assurance policy, we have addressed in there. So if you follow the link that was provided in the presentation slides, you'll be able to see all those questions. And then again, if you have questions about your financial assurance policy, you can email us. And then there's actually a secondary financial assurance page that the financial assurance that those folks run. And we'll bounce questions off of each other to make sure that we are all accurate. Again, it is very important that you review all of your information before submitting through e-permits or paper. Okay, we don't want to slow. My whole goal is to optimize and make this the most efficient process we can, but it takes the regulated community to spend the amount of time that we need them to spend on making sure their information is accurate when they send it to us. Okay, so here's this is the web page that has a video available on the TCEQ website to assist in setting up a Steers account. Again, this is another TCEQ webpage, but setting up the Steers account is the same. You can follow that link. I would recommend having the Steers page open, and there's some downloadable information there, and then you can watch the video and go at your own pace. Again, as previously mentioned, setting up a Steers account can be a bit time consuming, but if you have all of your site-specific information, spending the time on the front end to get it set up will save you hours of time in the long run. Make sure that when you sit down to do this, you have all of your pertinent information regarding financial assurance, the SPA agreement that needs to be signed, which is basically like ensuring, you're signing off to say that you're able to do these things on Steers. And before you start the process of creating your account, you want to make sure you have all this information ready. The video should help, although it is specific to Tier 2. Again, the setup process for PST is still the same. Here in the next calendar year, we hope to create resources from the PST side for Steers that will assist our customers directly, but we're very much in the early development stages of this at this time, and I don't even want to say more about it than that, but we do plan on creating a video in the next calendar year to assist our customers specifically. Okay, I tried to go through that quickly because I know we have we're on a tight time frame, but are there any questions? I know I'm just a big dumb manager, but I'll do my best to answer the questions you have. And those I can't, I'll request that you send them to our PST proxy box, and one of my subject matter experts will be able to follow up with you on that.
Well, thank you for that, Shannon. We'll give a few moments for some questions to roll in. We will answer them in the order that they are asked, and we will also post a link to our survey in the Q&A. So please take a few minutes after the webinar to let us know how we did and if we can improve the webinar. I do have a question for Becky, if you're willing to answer.
Yeah, I'm here.
Is there a way that we could ask for someone to do a pre-walk through with us? Is the question.
So TCEQ staff don't typically do a walkthrough mock investigation, but we can, our small business local government assistance staff can meet with you leading up to an investigation if you're wondering what that's going to look like. There's PST investigation checklists that are available that we can send you in the chat. And we can go over those checklists. If you contact the investigator, if there's someone who's coming out to investigate your facility, just ask them which checklist they're going to use. And that way we can make sure that you know which checklist they're going to be using so you can get familiar with that terminology. You can also reach out to your local small business, local government assistance compliance specialist. So each regional office of the TCEQ has a small business staff member that could help you if there's other questions that you have. So there's a link to the staff that are across the state in the chat as well.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
I went ahead and stopped sharing if y'all had other information you wanted to include.
We do have a question for you, Shannon.
Okay.
If a consultant, or can a consultant submit application in STEERS on behalf of a client?
Yes, if the consultant has the appropriate, I'm kind of using my air quotes here, authority to do so. So the answer is yes in the short run, but they need to make sure that they have all those appropriate, authorities to submit on behalf of that customer.
Perfect. Thank you for that. All right. Well, we don't see any other questions. Just don't forget to do our survey if y'all don't mind. Reminder, we will be posting a recording. And Shannon, Becky, if it's okay with you, we can conclude this.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for the invite, and we'll look forward to the next one.
Awesome. Well, thank y'all everyone for attending today at our UST Compliance Notebook webinar session 2. And if we did not answer your questions today, or if you think of more, please contact us at psthelp@tceq.texas.gov. And thank you again, and I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your day.